think what I'd really like to start with is the question. I'd like to ask you, why are you here? How did you get here? Because every single one of us is in this space with a story. We've all come because there's been some kind of an aha moment of some sort. To kind of put in context where I'm coming from in terms of this subject of ethical production management of artisanal fashion, it's important to know our why. There's all kinds of resources out there to be able to get the how-tos, but the why is really vital in ethical fashion, because above everything, ethical fashion has to be about respectful relationships, and that's with people and with our planet. And that respect goes throughout the whole process, not just in production management. So for myself, I moved to Bangladesh in 1989. I'd trained as a textile designer in the UK and had worked a few years freelance and had the opportunity to go to Bangladesh and work with weavers to help create more export-orientated fabrics. And that was going really well. And I was in a weaving workshop one day. Looms were clacking away, the guys were singing, keeping rhythm. It was all humid and dusty. And I just thought, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do. Because in London, it was great. People loved your fabrics. But here, the fabrics these guys were producing, they were going for an order in Holland, I think it was. I knew, with it being a fair trade agency, they were getting paid well, their kids were in good schools, they were healthy. There was all kinds of good stuff happening as a result of weaving through my designs or anybody else's designs. And that was it. I was hooked, and I'm still hooked. So that was a long time ago, 1989. But that was kind of how I came to be living and working amongst the weavers of Bangladesh. It's been an incredible journey and continues to be, especially as over these last decades, we've seen this awareness of sustainability, of fair trade, of ethical sourcing really begin to gain momentum. And now all of you who are attending here definitely are in this groove, which is fantastic to be a part of. As Julia mentioned earlier, my real mission is about connecting designers and brands with the wealth of production that is possible in Bangladesh, ethically and with artisanal production. Why? Because I believe fair trade, handmade goods really check all the bases. It means that brands can have transparent supply chains. It means that makers can have healthy families. And frankly, it means that our planet gets a break, because the whole system facilitates good environment. This PDF that I've put together, I'll touch on in towards the end a little bit. But for now, to know, one of the key elements in ethical production management of artisanal fashion has to be clear communication. Clear communication in everything, clear communication of expectations and of processes. That PDF I've put together so that designers who are not used to working with handwoven fabrics can really get an understanding of how simple it is to create your own fabrics, your own handwoven fabrics, and something of the process that's involved in that. So that is the clearest communication at the start, so that people know the colors that they have to work with, the kind of structures that they can work with. So from working with the designers, first of all, is where production management starts. The base that I use is working with recycled yarns that are created from garment factory waste. Yarns that are fabric that's broken down into fiber, then twisted into yarn, and is then hand woven into the fabrics that we create at Motif Handmade. So at the moment, obviously, we are relying on a wasteful industry in order to do this. There will come a tipping point where industries are less wasteful. Sadly, that's probably a long way off yet, but that's where we're heading to. As you can see, we've got computers here and we're working face to face, but it is very straightforward nowadays to work remotely, as we are even right now. Ethical production of artisanal fashion also means learning each other's production language. Learning a few phrases in each other's language is also good, but for example, I had to unlearn all the universal notation for weaving designs that I had learned at college and was using professionally. Weaving community in Bangladesh had their own traditional way of keeping their notes of their structures and things. I didn't have to learn all of them, but I had to adapt the way that I could communicate design so that the weavers I was working with could still work at the level of skill that they are used to. So be prepared and recognize that this building up of resources amongst the people that are producing our goods is really vital. And having an understanding that for all of us, it's the same. We don't know what we don't know, right? So just enter into these relationships with humility and recognize that often at least one person in the mix is working in at least their second or third language. So just bear all of that in mind. The other important element to remember is timing, because you have to be realistic about timeframes. You can't have slow fashion fabrics and production at fast fashion speeds. Now, obviously, there's a whole education element going on here that our customer base has to become more aware of and buy into. But weather is a huge factor in artisanal production. The seasons, what's happening. Do all hands have to be on deck to be able to bring the harvest in? Is the monsoon heavy? There are certain times of the year in Bangladesh, it takes 3 or 4 times longer to dry the yarn than it does at others. So these are things that we need to keep in mind, because they're the reality that we're dealing with. And as we move forward in ethical production, it's the realities that we have to be real about. The other element to really take into consideration is what happens with your production and your raw materials. It's up to you to do your due diligence on people's certifications and the various systems that are required in order to do that. At Motif, we are a fair trade registered company in Bangladesh with Ekota Fair Trade Forum. That's the national fair traders. They are themselves a member of the WFTO, the World Fair Trade Organization. And so we move in that sphere. So it's important as you move forward as designers and engaging with artisanal producers that you have confidence in the various systems that are being used for production, both of your raw materials and of your finished goods. We are able to supply ethical small batch manufacturing as well at Motif. And so these are the other things to include in your planning. There's the production of materials, then there's the production of the finished goods. And then finally, there's the element of shipping. The most eco-efficient means of shipment is by sea. So from Bangladesh to the US, for example, where I'm based, that's about a 6 to 8 week shipment. I usually give that window. It can be a little bit quicker, but you never know. So that also has to be planned in, because like I said, the eco impact of sea shipment is so much less than by air. Obviously, there are offset systems that you can use, but that's very much what it's the planning that has to be a key part of production management with artisanal production, as with any production, but very specifically with that. So this is a beautiful, you might know this is an ECAT fabric, which is very, very special. The tide warp and the tide weft dyed with indigo. Absolutely beautiful. Actually, that's the stuff that's behind me here as well. So then the other thing that I would say, please, 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 is get to see your production team as soon as you can. When you are involved in artisanal production, this is not about machinery. People are creating with their own hands, with their own skills, with traditions that may have been passed down for generations in some cases. In some cases, people may be learning these skills for the first time in their families as a form of income generation. But there are different ways in which people are absolutely the core of what is happening in your production. So make that a reality and a priority, that build it into your budget, whatever it takes, as soon as you can, actually get to visit your team, because it will be a gear change for you in your understanding of what happens in that environment, but also for your team, that they will know that you're serious about this relationship moving forward. I just wanted to say that when you're engaged with your team, that is the mark that is going to set you apart. There's so much that happens in the greenwashing in these days that people will say, oh yes, we're fair trade, we are committed to ethical production. And one year when hand weaving might be really the trend, great, they've got a fantastic production going on with hand weavers. Next season, perhaps it's batik that is the trend. So they'll move their order from Bangladesh to, say, Indonesia, where there's a different style of handcrafting. What happens to all the people that have been trained up for that huge order in Bangladesh? They no longer have work. They've been trained up in these skills to be able to do things. And I have seen this over the years happen. And that's all well and good for the people in Bali, Indonesia, wherever it is. But what about next year when the trend is for embroidery and they go somewhere else? Ethical fashion at its core has to be about relationship and about continuing these relationships and being committed to them in all the ups and downs that happen. So I really would just encourage you to move along with that as your modus operandi. As I mentioned, I have on my website, motifhandmade.com, this download, which is free to download just for your email to put you on a list. You'll be able to see simply how to create fair trade handmade fabrics. You can be on our list for little mini mails of encouragement. And you also get a link to be able to book a call with me, which I'm really happy to engage with any kind of questions that you might have for going forward with ethical production with artisanal products. So yeah, I think one of the things I would really encourage you as ethical designers moving forward, coming in now, you are at a stage in this whole process which is mind-blowing. It's like through the pandemic, this whole understanding of supply chains has gone on fast forward. So those of us, like Dr. James as well, who've been in this scene for decades, we are so excited to see the opportunities and resources that you now have at your fingertips to be able to move this forward exponentially. So would really encourage you to do that. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard because the wheel is still turning. But I would say continue in a vein of being humble, honest, hardworking, and keep respecting the people and the planet in the process. That's what I'd encourage you with going forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you.